I just closed on this townhome on the north side of Chicago. It's 3 stories and it has 3 bedrooms and 1.5 bathrooms, and it's about 1,800 square feet. And it has a parking space out back, which can be pretty hard to come by, at least in many parts of Chicago. All told, I'm buying this property for $285,000, and it's probably worth closer to $300,000, but I'm getting it for $285,000 with only 5% down because I'm using owner-occupied financing. That means my down payment is only around $14,000 to control a nearly $300,000 piece of real estate. But anyways, let's take a look at the property. Oh, hey, come on in. Welcome home. So this townhome is about 1,800 square feet, and we're in the master bedroom right now. The top floor is all hardwood, so is the living room downstairs. The hardwood floors do need to be refinished. They're pretty beat up, but they are in good enough shape to definitely be refinished. So trying to do that, but we gotta get a contractor first, and it's actually kind of hard to flag one down, but I should have someone pretty soon to do that. But anyways, we can go check out the other bedrooms. Here's the second bedroom. The floors are a little creaky up here too, so when we refinish them, we'll anchor some of them down too. But here's the second bedroom, and we can go ahead and check out the third bedroom as well. And here's the third bedroom, which is a little bit smaller than all the others. So even though this is a townhome and we have neighbors on either side of us with shared walls, it's not a condominium or anything like that, in that there's no association, there's no common area that's shared or any expenses like that. We actually own the plot of land that this townhome sits on, so we have the entire thing, so all 3 floors, which is pretty nice. So let's go check out the basement hallway. And here we are. So we're down in the basement, and this was actually a big issue prior to closing. This spot right here, this little concrete spot, this was actually leaking pretty badly because right outside of the property, there was a leak with the main water line that needed to be repaired, and it actually started leaking prior to me even going under contract. I noticed it then. That was actually kind of a mistake on this deal, in that I wasn't under contract before I actually raised this issue with the seller, and that allowed another person to put in an offer and forced me to make a higher bid after that because I still wanted the property. I knew they were going to fix this issue because we weren't going to close without them fixing that or throwing me some money to fix it myself. So that wasn't something that actually held up closing a couple weeks, but we got it all fixed. It looks much better now. It was actually leaking and making quite a bit of noise as well because there was a leak outside of the unit and you could hear it. It was pretty bad. So that's all taken care of, and that's great. And now we have a great new repaired water line. If you couldn't already tell, we're in the kitchen right now, which recently was updated. Pretty new appliances here, some nice granite countertops. And another thing that we had to negotiate in closing was this subfloor right here. This is right under the kitchen. The kitchen is directly above us. The subfloor was actually rotted out because there must have been an old leak well before we actually went under contract. So a lot of the subfloor was rotted out. You can see some pictures right here, or at least the limited materials I have to show you what that actually looked like. It was pretty bad. They had to replace that whole subfloor. I negotiated that in. I was going to ask it for a credit for it, but they already had a construction crew ready to go to do it. So they took care of it. They did a nice job. It's all repaired now. So that's not going to be an issue. The structural support underneath the kitchen should be all good. And it also eliminates a potential mold hazard that was there with the old rotted wood that clearly had quite a bit of water into it since it was starting to collapse pretty bad. So that was another thing that was negotiated and paid for. Now, another issue that was taken care of prior to closing by the seller was actually taking care of the sump pump. It was completely unsealed and definitely needed a very thorough cleaning. That was taken care of. It's all looking tidy now. Now, even though this property is in good shape and it's plenty livable, there are a couple things that we do want to take care of. I did actually receive a $3,000 credit from the seller at closing, and that can be used towards really any of these issues. The first one being some masonry work that needs to be done pretty soon. Probably get some new tuck pointing along certain parts of the actual property. There's 2 sides to it, 2 brick sides to it, I should say, a front and a back, and then the rest is shared walls. So I only have 2 sides to worry about, so it's not a lot of square footage, but it does need to be taken care of. I already mentioned restaining the hardwood floors as well. That'll be something we'll do. That's probably about 800 square feet of the actual property. The rest is vinyl plank, and then the other half is hardwood. So it's a little awkward having 2 different floor types, but I think it actually works given the layout of the property. And plus, I think hardwood floors doors look really nice once they're all tidied up and finished, so I want to keep that if I can. And there are a few points in the house that do need some paint touch-up, mainly around a new outlet that was installed, as well as around the light switch in the bathroom, as well as by that leak down in the basement. There was some paint that needs to be taken care of since it was removed or otherwise sanded off or scratched, so I want to actually take care of that. That'll be pretty easy, and it's really some very minor portions, but that's going to be really easy to get done. And another thing I'd consider is adding some different light fixtures, or really like a ceiling fan in the bedroom. Since right now it's very basic looking, I know the last person who owned this property was a landlord themselves, so I'm sure that was to reduce costs, but I think at the price point where this is going to be renting at, it's going to make sense to have some ceiling fans, plus it would help for a little bit of an extra wow factor if there is any on this property. Not that this is a high-end luxury unit by any means, but I think it'll help a little bit when it comes to actually renting out the property. But what about the numbers behind this deal? Whenever I'm buying any piece of real estate, I want to see how it would do as a rental. Assuming I'm not just buying it as a rental straight up, then of course I'm going to do that analysis. In this case, I'm going to be living in the property for a year, but I don't intend on living in it forever, so I want to make sure I have that ability to rent it out without issue and that I can get a decent return once I actually do that. Like I said, the purchase price was $285,000, which is a down payment of about $14,000. That means my loan is $270,750 at 2.99% interest over 30 years, fixed rate, so that's really awesome. Now, because it's only 5% down, I do have to pay what's called private mortgage insurance, or PMI for short, and that is only an extra $68 per month. You have to pay PMI whenever you buy a property for less than 20% down. You're going to have some sort of extra payment, I guess, to mitigate some of that extra risk of having such a low down payment. The bank is taking a lot of risk. Well, at least whoever actually owns the mortgage after the bank sells it to someone else, which is the most likely outcome, but that's what that is. Once I have 20% equity in the property, whether that's through appreciation or paying down the loan, I'll be able to get rid of that PMI payment, no problem. I was able to shave off almost all of my closing costs because of two things. One, there was that $3,000 credit I already mentioned, but also because I represented myself as a real estate agent on this deal. So I actually get a commission on the back end of a little bit over $4,000, and that covered most of my closing costs. However, those savings are pretty much being diverted into a reserve fund to have extra cash on the side, just so that if something pops up, if I need to replace my roof all of a sudden, or if I lose my job and I need to pay the mortgage with my savings, I want to have that ready to go. Whenever you're dealing with any amount of debt, it's always important to have some amount of reserves, whatever makes you comfortable, I suppose, but definitely at least a few months worth of payments, and ideally to be able to cover larger expenses if those come up without having to dip into savings elsewhere in your own personal financial situation. So all told, I'm investing about $24,000 to $25,000 into this deal between the down payment, any leftover closing costs, and my initial reserve fund, and also some of those repairs I'll be making. Now, when it comes to my monthly payment and expenses, what are we looking at? Well, with the mortgage, it's about $1,200 when you factor in PMI and all that. Then we have insurance and taxes on top of that. Now, taxes in Chicago and Cook County in general are pretty high and are some of the highest in the country, so that is always a major drawback with investing in the Chicagoland area. So my annual property taxes are about $7,000 a year, which is around $580 to $600 a month. For those of you keeping score at home, that's about an effective tax rate of 2.5% on the property value. Though at least in the first year, since I'll be living in it, I'll get a homeowner's tax exemption, so that'll lower that tax bill at least while I'm living there. But I'm looking at this through a rental lens, so I wouldn't have that exemption when that happens. And even though this is a townhome, there's no association, so it's not as though it's a condominium development or something like that, so I don't have any payments outside of my actual expenses and taxes. And for my projections, I assume that I'll be taking 7% out for vacancy, 7% out for capital expenditures, and then about 10% out for property management. So pretty close to an extra 25% there of expenses to actually maintain the property as a rental. Vacancy refers to having some savings set aside, so when the property is vacant, when a tenant eventually moves out, you have some extra savings built up every single month to take care of that time when it does come, because it will eventually happen. And then capital expenditures refers to actually repairing the property if it needs any work, say like a roof going out or whatever maintenance item needs to be taken care of. Properties don't last forever, and you got to plan accordingly. Now, this property, by the time I rent it out, should rent for at least $25.50, and that's because this is what this property rented for about 2 years ago. So rents should be a bit higher there, so I assume that's kind of my floor for what rents could be, but it could be well over $2,600 in this area. A townhome with its own parking space just a few blocks from Lake Michigan is going to be something that's pretty desirable in Chicago, so I'm assuming I won't have much trouble renting it out as long as I keep it in good shape, of course. But for these projections, I'll use that $25.50 number to be a little bit conservative. So if we take the $25.50 in income minus the $13.23 in expenses, that would leave us with a net operating income, or an NOI, of about $12.26 per month. month. Then we subtract the debt service of about $1,207, and that leaves me with a monthly cash flow number of about $18 or $19 per month. So if you're looking at this from just a cash on cash flow perspective, this is definitely not a good deal. However, you have to remember this is 95% leveraged, and I am socking away some money in reserves to make sure that I can weather storms. So you really have to factor in principal paydown here, because just in my first year, I'll be having about $5,600 in principal paydown, nearly $5,700, compared to my initial investment of about $25,000. That is a pretty high return. We're looking at about 24% per year in annual return once you add in the little bit of cash flow as well. So just to reiterate, I invested about $25,000. I'm getting almost $5,700 back in principal paydown, plus a little bit of cash flow, and that's in the first year. So if we're just looking at the first year return on investment, that's about a 24% return. And that number will accelerate as the years go by and as principal paydown gets faster and faster, because with a 30-year amortized loan, the first 2 decades or so are mostly being paid towards interest. You don't get that super aggressive principal paydown that comes naturally until the last decade or so of holding the mortgage. And I would intend on holding this for the very long term and just letting that principal paydown do its thing. I'm almost looking at this property as a sort of savings account. As time goes on, the loan will get paid down. Sure, I'm not getting a bunch of cash flow or anything like that unless I do some sort of refinance and lower the actual loan payment, but where rates are at, I highly doubt they'll be at this level for at least too much longer, but who knows what will happen. I'm not going to guess what's going to happen with interest rates, but the point is, as long as I keep healthy reserves and make sure that all expenses are met through the rental payment, then I should be getting this really lucrative principal paydown over time that will end up with a fully paid off property, and that's kind of like a savings account. And that way, if I wanted to liquidate it or refinance it again and use the money for something else. And if you want to analyze a rental property yourself, but you're not really sure where to start, I do have a free real estate deal metric spreadsheet in the description below. You can use that as a template and adjust it as you see fit, or you can leave it as is and do some very quick basic analysis on a rental property. So anyways, that's the deal. My plan with this deal, like I've said, is to live in it for at least 1 year, since that's what my loan says I have to do. I have to move in within 60 days and then live in it for 1 year before I can go and rent it out to someone else or do something like that. Meanwhile, I'll rent out the condo that I'm currently filming this segment of the video from, and that will be another one of my rentals. So now I'll have 3 properties, one in Indianapolis, one condo in Chicago, and then the third, which is the townhome in Chicago that I'll be living in. And what's really powerful about that is the cash flow from this condo will actually be used to offset a good bit of the expenses over in the townhome that I'll be moving into. And I plan on repeating this process again by the time we're ready to move in about a year's time. Though I guess you never know what the future will hold. So there you have it. That's how I acquired a near $300,000 townhome in Chicago, and that's what the deal looks like. If you guys have any questions about this deal, definitely let me know in the comments below. I'd be happy to answer any questions that I didn't answer here. I do plan on maybe doing more of a detailed numbers breakdown in the near future for those of you who really just want to see how to analyze a deal in depth. But otherwise, if you like this video, please like it, since that would help the channel out a lot. And if you like this sort of content about real estate or just investing in general, I put out new videos every single week about those topics. And if you're interested in that sort of stuff, definitely have a look around the channel. And if you like what you see, be sure to subscribe. But until next time, take care.